I've been telling you, the dump is not ready for prime time. The WNBA is not ready for the spotlight that was generously given to them once Caitlin Clark left professional basketball at Iowa to compete against athletes who are professionals at missing layups. You know, there is this old saying, there's no such thing as bad press or all attention is good attention. And while that is true, that does not mean that attention and publicity, it doesn't have its consequences. One of the consequences of increased publicity, especially in a league that has been completely ignored for 3 decades, that attention, it exposes your flaws. And God only knows there are a lot of flaws in the WNBA. I believe they choose to refer to them as players. Now, you can get away with a lot when no one is paying attention to you. You can do or say whatever the hell you want when people don't know you exist. But once the spotlight is on you, or in the case of the WNBA, once the spotlight is on one player, causing the rest of the league to barely come out of the shadows, you gotta be a little bit more careful with what you say. For the better part of 30 years, the dump divers in the WNBA, they have been begging for your attention. They're like the Lizzo on prom night, hoping some dude or any dude will notice her. And speaking of the Lizzo, did you guys see her latest inspirational video? The purveyor of body positivity, she has made the executive decision to lose weight. Apparently, the Lizzo came to the harsh realization that requiring a forklift for transportation, that's not healthy. All kidding aside, good for Lizzo. Maybe, just maybe, some of the criticism, or as the mainstream media referred to call it, fat phobia, maybe some of that criticism motivated the Lizzo to get healthy and lose weight. Whatever the reason was, it's good to see Lizzo taking care of herself. But anyway, for the better part of 30 years, dump divers in the WNBA, they have been begging to be noticed. Now that they are receiving the attention they desired, it seems like some players in the WNBA, they think they are entitled to lecture the fan base, and in some cases, outright insult them. You know, this situation sounds eerily similar. Wasn't there another league that insulted and lectured their fan base? Wasn't there another league where the players thought they were entitled to treat the paying customer like shit? If I remember correctly, I think it was the NBA. If you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. All my players in the WNBA, why don't you guys ask Adam Silver how things worked out when NBA players went to war with their own fan base? I know this audience remembers what happened 4 years ago during the NBA Summer of Woke Love. The NBA proudly accepted a double dose of the woke wiener. They embraced mythical racism. Instead of having their names on the back of their jerseys, NBA players, they came up with these nice virtue signaling phrases. End racism, end hunger, feed the children. Oh, it's all about the children. There's no hope with dope. People tuning in to the NBA, they were confused. They didn't know if they were watching professional basketball or a fucking public service announcement from Saved by the Bell. During the summer of Wiener, the NBA essentially told supporters of Donald Trump, "Orange Man bad!" They essentially told Trump supporters that we don't want your business. Since most normal people don't need to be told twice that they're not wanted, millions of normal people, they complied with the NBA's demands and they turned the league off. Here we are 4 years later and the NBA has never recovered. Although what has happened this season in the WNBA and their fan base, it's not nearly as drastic as what happened in the NBA 4 years ago, certain WNBA players, they seem to have a level of vitriol towards their fan base. But there's a huge difference between the NBA In the WNBA, the NBA actually had fans they could afford to lose. The NBA, they could afford to piss off millions of people and still receive $76 billion from the networks. The NBA had a solid foundation. It is the complete opposite in the WNBA. The dump. They don't have fans. Caitlin Clark has fans. The WNBA doesn't have a foundation. This is a league being kept alive by subsidization, which is probably why the sense of entitlement is so rampant in the WNBA. Maybe unknown players think they can do or say whatever the hell they want without consequence because the NBA will continue paying the bills to keep this charity alive. Last night, Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Felines, they beat an unknown collection of pretend basketball players from Connecticut who refer to themselves as the Female Suns. Now, to their credit, well, to Caitlin Clark's credit, the end of the game, it was really exciting. Now, obviously, there were plenty of struggles offensively. I would expect nothing less from a league that's allergic to offense and features 140 players who can't make layups. But Caitlin Clark ended up winning the game 84-80. In the NBA, that is known as the start of the fourth quarter. In the WNBA, that's known as quadruple overtime. But after the game, an unknown player named Dijonai Carrington, she got on social media to send a message to fans in Indiana. With this likely being the first time that she has played in an arena without empty seats, you would think Dijonai Carrington would express her gratitude to the people of Indiana for showing up to watch her attempt to entertain them. I guess Dijonai Carrington was bitter after the loss because she took out some of her frustrations on the fans. Check it out for yourself. The Indiana Felines have the nastiest fans in the W. Ooh. I tried to find evidence of fans of Caitlin Clark being nasty towards Dijonai Carrington. I was thinking that maybe Dijonai Carrington herself would provide evidence to back up her accusations. Imagine my surprise, though, when I found nothing. In my search for examples of nastiness, I did find some interesting things about Dijonai Carrington. If last night's tweet was a one-off, if it was the result of a bad night, no big deal. But as it turns out, DJ Carrington, she has a long history of being a professional whiner and complainer. Last week, the Female Suns from Connecticut, they made WNBA history along with the LA Sparkles. Both of these coastal dumps, they accomplished a first. And you guys know how much the victims in the WNBA love a first. They became the first anonymous players in the WNBA to play in the Boston Garden. Well, Casey, don't you mean the TD Garden? The Boston Garden was demolished in the late 1990s. No, I mean the Boston Garden. I'm old school. It will always be known as the Boston Garden to me. But since they were given the honor of accomplishing this first, you would think that DJ Carrington would be feeling grateful. Once again, she was filled with bitterness. A game of this magnitude should have been broadcast on national television. Why was it only shown locally in Boston? People should not have to pay extra money to watch us miss shots. If I had to guess, the networks were not willing to broadcast this game because there isn't a recognizable player on either one of these teams. But even with that being the case, you would think that ESPN would be willing to broadcast this historic monumental event. I mean, ESPN is supposedly the proud home of women's sports, right? When I see the promos, ESPN's always boasting about being the proud home of the WNBA. So what was so important last week that forced ESPN to overlook this game? It's the middle of August. ESPN doesn't broadcast the NFL preseason. I know they had the Little League World Series, but the worldwide leader in woke, they have a family of networks. You mean to tell me they couldn't put this game on ESPN Dos, ESPN Deportes, ESPN Dump? I checked the schedule last week for ESPN2, the proud home of women's sports. They failed to broadcast this historic event because they were too busy broadcasting a fantasy football draft, not the NFL draft. Not the NBA draft. Hell, it wasn't even the meaningless draft in Major League Baseball. The WNBA was overlooked by ESPN for a literal fantasy. Throughout the season, Dijonai Carrington, she has involved herself in this one-sided feud with Caitlin Clark. She has went after Katie Rue on social media. She has went after her on the court. Anytime Dijonai Carrington is criticized, she has this tendency to lash out on social media. 2 months ago, she told WNBA fans that she is refusing to shut up and dribble. What did she mean? What stand was she taking? No one knows because just like the tweet I showed you guys earlier, Dijonai Carrington doesn't explain. This sense of entitlement, it is prevalent throughout the WNBA. Remember earlier this season when players were demanding chartered flights? Kat Engelbert kept telling them, we can't afford it. Hell, we can't afford the Greyhound, much less private airfare. But WNBA players, they kept pressuring her. The mainstream media, they kept pressuring her. Eventually, Kat Engelbert acquiesced to these unrealistic demands and provided chartered airfare to entitled players. What was the end result? Instead of losing the usual $10 million this season, the WNBA, they are now on pace to lose $50 million. And even without the chartered flights, the WNBA would still be on pace to lose $25 million. Watch what I tell you. This offseason, WNBA players, they are going to demand higher salaries. They will claim their demands are justified. They'll point to attendance, they'll point to TV ratings, and they will claim that they have earned higher salaries. And maybe we'll get lucky. Maybe we will get lucky and they'll go on strike. The thing about entitlement, it's never enough. You will never be able to satisfy the entitled. Mark my words, the demands are coming. And as of right now, the WNBA, they can't afford to meet them. But give me your thoughts on this. Dijonai Carrington attacks WNBA fans, accusing them of being nasty. She backs up these accusations by providing zero evidence. She also has a long history of attacking Caitlin Clark. Do you think it's jealousy? Also, with the increased exposure, will WNBA players push for higher salaries? If the league refuses to give in to those demands, do you think WNBA players will go on strike? Let me know. Sound off in the comments below. Like, subscribe, share the video. Appreciate your support. Best way to contact me is by email at btlkc84@gmail.com, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.